Hello, welcome to What Am I Doing, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast where one experienced dungeon master and one failed scriptwriter discuss D&D topics. My name is McCaffery, and my ridiculously inadequate pod partner is Kinsey. I've read last week's script.
What?
How are you doing today, Lewis?
I don't know who you talk to. Apparently I'm Connor today, so... Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you, Lewis?
I'm manic depressive. I'm gonna fucking kill myself.
You sound just like me. It's beautiful.
Yeah, how are you doing? You good?
Yeah, I'm doing...
Enjoying life?
I'm doing dandy.
I ask you every episode how you're doing. We live in the same house.
Yeah, I mean, we don't
I'm
speak
sick of
apart,
asking.
Yeah, apart from when we sit at this table.
It's true, well, it's the only way we find each other interesting.
Well, exactly.
There we go.
Exactly, and attractive, I might say.
Well, of course, who has the time to look into each other's eyes outside of a podcast session?
I don't know. Not me. Not
exactly.
me. Eyes are overrated.
And talking about time, we just want to do a small advertisement, our first advertisement ever.
Oh.
We're not being paid for it, of course.
Oh,
we're not
okay.
that. We're not rich. But yeah, just to thank Dungeons & Dragons UK subreddit.
Oh, of course, yes.
For letting us post, because Reddit, apparently you just can't post anywhere, and groups don't let you advertise.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that I tell people I use Reddit sound cool, but I've no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't know what a subreddit is, but that's what they told me they are.
Yeah.
They could have told me anything, and I would have said it on the podcast. Just for anyone who wants to spend big money advertising on a podcast, I'll say fucking anything.
Yeah, I mean, all we need is a bit of validation and we'll praise you.
Give us the time, give us the money, we'll do it. And with that, today's episode is on time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
It suits. It suits.
It is. I said time about 17 times, 18 now, in that intro there, just to hint at what it was.
Just in case people haven't got the memo yet that this episode is time.
Exactly. For everyone who is severely autistic, you would have counted that and known it was 19 times that I said it, not 17. So with that, let's get to it. Today's episode is on time. Is time important to a D&D adventure? How do we make it important? And when does it get too messy? Lewis, I've got myself stuck inside a clock and the hands are crushing me with every breath. How am I getting out? What am I doing?
With every breath? I'm very confused.
I'm being crushed. Imagine the little hands on my windpipe.
Yeah.
The big hand is in places that I have to point to on a bear in a courtroom.
Yeah, okay. You know what I think you do? I think you just double it and give it to the next person and cheat your way out of the system.
Double it? The time?
Yeah.
How do I double time?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. You're just making up
I just keep seeing it on TikTok, so that's what you do. Double it and give it to the next person.
Okay, alright, yeah, sure, alright. Cool. And with that, because I don't have a fucking clue what he's talking about, with that, the first question, time is often overlooked in D&D or kind of forgotten about. How does a DM make good use of time in their sessions? Combat, for example.
I think one good way to do it, I've done in the past for a dungeon master, is have some kind of, especially if it's in person around a table, have some kind of physical time-based prompt.
Oh, okay.
Prompt,
like a little egg timer.
Yeah, like I've got like a minute or two, I can't remember exactly, little like sand timer thing where if people are in discussion for too long, let's say if it is in combat, or let's say if they're trying to figure something out in a tavern and there is a time crunch but they're getting a bit distracted, all you need to do, put that timer on the table, and as soon as people notice it, they will freak out and start panicking. Or if you're online, you can have an online timer or something like that. Or even, as you've done in your sessions, have like a ticking clock in the background, which, whilst it doesn't necessarily say that there's a specific amount of time left, it definitely makes you realise that time is passing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's important to what's going on, and also it just sounds like impending doom. Unless you have the countdown theme tune, otherwise that would just sound a bit weird. Yes, it's the only way I can climax. Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I think that's a good. We'll get into detail on time, obviously. Otherwise, we'd only have one question.
Yep.
But yeah, I think a lot of people take way too long decision making, which is quite ironic for a game that requires you to make decisions.
Oh, definitely.
Most 90% of players aren't good at it, and yeah, especially in combat, they go, "How long's a round? Oh, I've got loads of time," and then they'll just take forever, and it loses the pacing, it loses the excitement, and it loses the. It should feel like it's fast and it's reactionary, and like all cards are on the table and it's all to lose. And if you're sitting there, someone's scratching their nose, going, "Yeah, I might do this. Can I do that?" and asking questions when you literally wouldn't be able to do that in a combat in real life. It loses the fun of it, the enjoyment, the risk.
I think one thing during combat.
Pleasure.
Sure. I think one thing you can do during combat, not necessarily time-based, but I think it adds that sense of urgency to it, or to the combat. And I've seen a lot of people do this, and right at the start of it, roll a d4, and after that number of rounds, have some kind of event happen. And then as soon as the players realise that's what you're doing, like have the roll, you could even have the roll not behind the DM screen so everyone can see the number, then they might panic thinking that reinforcements are coming in 3 turns, or there's going to be some environmental impact, which might make them be a bit more hasty about it, try and actually finish the combat before that event.
Okay, right, let's move on to the next one. Travelling is often a key feature in an adventure, and time can really slow the pacing between locations. Can you give any good tips as to how DMs and even players can make the most out of those in-between moments?
So like they travelling in between towns and things like that?
It could be anything really, but it's a case of travelling. People sometimes just skip it, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't feel like it's earned.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do get that if it's literally like, you're walking now, and you've got about a day, so do you want to rest? And it can be quite boring. How do we spice that up?
I think one thing is obviously having some kind of random encounters table, which you could, if they're travelling for more than 4 hours, let's say, you could always ensure there's a random encounter and then just roll to see what that is. Or if you dot a series of, I'll say encounters again, but not necessarily people or creatures, just things they can notice or see, whether it's someone's dropped a notebook that might have some names in or whatever, it might be a puzzle, or they might even find a trap that someone set up but no one's there. Like, have them constantly roll checks and have them talk to each other. I think travelling is a great opportunity to just let the players do their own thing in terms of talking and role-playing, and just sit back as the DM and say, right, you've got this time now to talk amongst yourselves in character, to get to know each other a bit more, and then you just leave them to it and only intervene when it gets quiet.
Okay, alright. We can use time as a mechanic to elevate adventures. That can be through traps or combat or even just roleplay scenarios. What examples can we come up with that adventurers and dungeon masters can make the most out of?
In terms of traps, let's say you're a dungeon master who has sent your party into a dungeon and you want to have some kind of a time crunch and that involves a trap, for example. You could have some kind of impending doom on this dungeon, and by that I mean it's filling up with water or it's getting incredibly hot, like let's say lava's pouring through it from one end, or even just have, let's say if you're sneaking into a dungeon, whoever inhabits that could be on their way to execute a friendly NPC or something. I think all of those will add some kind of a time-sensitive element, because all the party will know that if they spend too long in there, either they or an NPC will die. I think having some kind of, every time-based thing needs to have some kind of a risk, otherwise players will just forget about it.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Really long-winded answer there to
thank you.
Put a bit of risk into.
Well, exactly. Clearly there's no risk for me taking.
No, we'd be dead. I think with traps, as an example there, we can put in things like sigils that within a certain amount of turns they'll do certain different types of damage. We've used that in the past, like elemental sigils on the floor, describing that there are noises coming from something. It might be the ticking of a clock, but it can be quite generic if it's like, oh, that's clearly a bomb then. But small things like this, maybe it's a turning of a book, but then the pages are speeding up.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Could even be footsteps getting like louder or quicker.
Yeah, just describing sounds goes a long way. Also, going back to traps and taking into role-play and combat, and that is someone stepping into a dungeon and you describe a pressure plate going off, but they don't know what for yet. And you give them a couple of turns to do their role-play. They're trying to work out what it is, or just go head first and still want to get to the end of the tunnel. And then you implement, after a couple of rounds of roleplay, that trap. You know, so I think there's a good few ways to go about using time as a really good tool. It doesn't have to be like, you've got a minute to do this. Sometimes not giving the people the answers is way more impactful for them. They're playing.
Definitely. I think as well, in any time-based situation, I don't think you want to throw one in every encounter, because then it just ruins it for when you genuinely need it.
Every tool should be used, you know, far and few, really. You don't want people to go, oh, well, I know what's going to happen in this session. You don't feel like a format, you know.
Exactly. And with the risks, I think when you use it sparingly, the higher the risk, the better. Especially when you don't know what that risk is. If you fear, or if the players fear that it might lead in a death or something crippling, then they are going to panic and they are going to try and speed through it.
All right, last question. How can time be used as a theme in campaigns?
I think one of the ways is, let's say, I can't think of a official campaign.
I don't think there is one that I know that time is like so crucial, but it could be not an official book. How, you know, because you could do it in one shots. I feel like time actually is probably used quite a lot in a one shot. But for like an ongoing piece, for me, the example I thought of was I'm literally just making as a go. Knowing that you have to get a couple of items together before this event happens. We've had that in the server that we were in, where people were doing loads of one-shots, but that, like, characters they'd come across or events that they would turn the tide of could impact the end goal, like the BBG's plans, you know, and there was only a certain amount of time to get that done.
Even I've just thought of like the Curse of Strahd campaign, that there are certain items that you need to acquire during that. But obviously, as you know, Strahd can visit you at any point. He knows what's going on largely throughout his realm. So that adds that can add the time element to it. But also just bearing in mind, especially if it's a homebrew campaign, whoever the BBG is or whoever enemies are in general, they're not going to just sit there and wait for the party to eventually catch them. They're going to be doing their own thing. To gain everything
to beat them.
Exactly. So obviously don't be an arse with it. You know, just, if you're the BBG, 3 sessions in, right, you've taken too long, and attack the party. But having them aware, or having the party aware that the villains are not just going to wait and that they are doing their own thing. And if they do nothing...
unlike Strahd, where the Strahd can turn up, even just giving slight updates on what the BBG is doing elsewhere, that might be as, like, on the nose as you just telling them what they're doing. Or it might be through, like, hearsay in a village.
Exactly.
Which is obviously way more... believable and within roleplay, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it really is kind of like know the group, know how it'll work. Maybe they do just want like straight up facts to know what they've got to do in their own sessions.
Like I say, it's keeping players up to date or keeping characters up to date. What you can do as well is throw in false information, because like you said, especially in a town, if there's rumours, not every rumour you hear is going to be correct. So if you add some unnecessary time crunch, the players might panic thinking that the BBG is about to attack a village when really they're not, or really they already have, or something like that.
Cool. Well, I think we covered a lot of different aspects there at the time, so it's good little podcast, that one.
A good use of time.
It was, yes. Today's adventure is sadly coming to a close, but we are back again next week with the topic: did dinosaurs have more time on their hands? If yes, who taught them the concept? And as always, thank you for tuning in, and if you'd like to join in on the D&D action or just support this show, then please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WhatAmID&D. I've been Connor Kinsey.
I've been Lewis McCaffery.
Good day.
Goodbye.